I guess one of the reasons we're all here is because of the way technology is changing and reshaping not just the IT landscape, but our business landscape. So 15, 20 years ago, IT was seen as a cost center, right? Slow. You always want money when you want to scale, etc. That mindset is starting to change, especially with the younger generation of staff that basically just expect it to be working. So that whole environment literally is creating challenges for IT to keep up with, right? And these challenges are not necessarily always infrastructure challenges, but things like security, compliance is coming through. If I said GDPR, would that mean anything to you guys?
Not a thing.
Not a thing, right? So you can say, I think that's next year, right? That's due next year.
Is this why we start to see all the likes of Deloitte and everything suddenly getting hacked just before?
Very interesting, isn't it?
Well, announcing it.
Yeah. Just for those of you that have got the EMS suite, right? And there is no one from Microsoft in here, so I can say EMS suite is not GDPR, right? So for those of you that know GDPR or understand a bit of GDPR, it's a regulation. Microsoft's EMS suite is a product suite. You still have to configure, understand what your data is, and set up policies, right? So you've got to comply to it. That's just a tool. But EMS suite won't do any compliance on your data if it's sitting on a database, like on SQL. If you've got personal information of someone, right, how is the EMS suite going to cover that, right? So grain of salt with GDPR, there's a lot of work in it, but actually there's, I'll show you some of those EMS tools today, how that can help with that, okay? So we talked about the challenges that organizations are facing, right? I think the left one is one that we're starting to see a lot more of, right? That enhanced mobility. But that brings a lot of concerns as well. Being able to take your work laptop. I think the cost of desktop to laptop is literally on parity these days. I don't know if IT departments do or don't, but most of the environments that we talk to nowadays, they don't really care. They do a desktop if they need to, but most staff that work from home or mobile workers, laptop these days. So greater risk, carrying data on the laptop, etc. is a concern. So now I've got to think about managing that device. I've got to think about the documents on that device. I've got to think about the user's identity. So all these challenges are coming in. Data leaks, I think, we know enough about that. I think this one is literally kicking in big time now. And the reason we're seeing a lot of uptake on the EMS suite or the Microsoft 365 suite these days is because the Azure UK data centers are kicked in, and now a lot of the UK government bodies are now going, okay, now we can get serious about this stuff. Is it announced yesterday, the Compliance Center?
It's announced the previews, yeah.
So Microsoft have announced a compliance center. I've signed up real quickly on the preview for it. But there is a thing, now for those on Office 365, there is a small component of compliance, right? There's a bit of rights management that you've got, right? DLP, data leakage protection, but there's sort of more like policies. So it will be interesting to see what compliance and regulations feed into that and how it works.
So basically, because Microsoft as an organisation need to focus so much themselves on GDPR meeting regulations, they've gone, well, we use all these Microsoft tool sets, our customers use these tool sets. Well, here you go, here's a new portal that'll go across your SharePoint, your Exchange, all your Office 365 stuff, all your OneDrive bits, and it will give you all your score rankings to say, hang on a second, these are the technology you've got in place in terms of multi-factor, data loss protection, Windows Ensure information protection. This is your score towards meeting GDPR, as well as, I think, the SOX and the ISO 27001 in there as well. So they're going to be making that probably available. Don't know yet whether there's going to be costs or anything involved. It'll probably be an E5 SKU thing, knowing them, but it'll be one place to go to say, what is my posture across my entire data set for GDPR? That's about as much as we know of it at the minute. Hopefully, like Ken was saying earlier, because it's not all just technology that can solve the problems related to GDPR, and a lot of it is just people and processes. Hopefully you'll be able to go through and do some sort of tick box exercise of, yes, we have this process in place and this, otherwise it's useless.
Yeah. The boundaries are shifting. The classic model, there's your office, right? There's your network, as per se. We put a boundary around that. We put a wall, pour some petrol on it, throw a match as my firewall. I trust everyone on the inside, right? That was the old mindset. But if I grab a USB stick, copy the files on it, and then walk out of the office, how am I protecting that boundary, right? And now, we talked about people working from home, remotely, etc. Well, okay. Now we're starting to see a lot of this stuff, right? We call it shadow IT. Basically, it is people in the office accessing cloud-based SaaS apps, right? And this is very common in marketing departments, etc. They'll go, oh, bugger it, I'll just open up a Box account. Right? So how can you even control that? How can you even know if Box is compliant, is ISO 27001 compliant? Does Box have some sort of security measurements, admin backends to it, right? And Box is one, there's about 13,000 of them out there, right? So if you bought EMS E5, there's a product called Cloud App Security, MCAS. That would help you understand that. But this is a real concern now because there are so many environments that I can save files to or access or build. How hard is it for me to build, put a company credit card in and get a CRM environment and start putting customer data in, right? So we call that shadow IT, meaning the business gets sick of waiting for IT to respond or react, so they go and start their own IT environments, and that's shadow IT, right? Under the MCAS suite, you can actually look through your firewall logs and see how many people are accessing these cloud-based products, right? And also get a score metric on it. But because those boundaries are shifting, your identity boundaries are shifting as well, okay? So accessing those cloud apps, accessing your machine, right? Sitting into your environment in the office is all about identity. Azure is no different, Microsoft, right? So regardless of what you're doing, whatever products you're looking at, identity is your core, right? So we really need to understand how important identity is. In Azure IaaS world, it's identity first, probably network second, right? They're the two key things that you need to understand well. But if you get your identity done correctly, right, then you can access single sign-on. We can cover that real quickly, but we'll show you the My Apps, the corporate app portal, is that. So you can access thousands of apps with one identity. Now the cloud identities, or the modern identities, is what we call a UPN, user principal name, which looks like an email format. Right? This is in Active Directory, in your AD. Most of you would be able to just switch it on if you haven't already done so. If you've got O365, for example, it's already there. Right? But it is pretty much a PowerShell script, day's work at the most. But then you can say to your end users, hey, did you know you can log onto your computer using your email address? Okay? And then what you've already done is you've got their identity prepped. Okay? So once you've got that identity and you understand how you can do it, you can basically scale, right? We can hook up multiple identities, we can do identity sharing, we can do identity stuffing, which we'll cover a bit later on, and we can work from anywhere. Give me an internet connection, right? And I can hop on, access things. So to get that first phase, right? Most of you guys, would it be fair to say most of you guys have got Azure Office 365 or EMS? Yeah? So you've done AD Connect, all right? The sync side of things.
Just on that one, is anyone still left on what was the older DIRSync? All on AD Connect?
Yeah. So AD Connect's preview of SSO has just ended, so it is now production. So SSO is single sign-on. So has anyone got ADFS environments at the moment? Right? So now is the question to ask, who do I federate with, right? Do I need ADFS, or am I just using it for Office 365 or Azure? Am I using it just to federate with Microsoft? Because if you are just federating with Microsoft, well, your AD Connect tool now has that feature built in, and you could literally switch it on, test it, and simplify your infrastructure. Okay? But if you're federating with other organizations, so federation is basically, I'll let you use my resource, but you've got to sign in with your own credentials, right? And vice versa. So for those of you that are familiar with it, it's like a trust relationship through the cloud. Okay? And you can control and set up conditions, etc. to it. But once you've got that, everything is synced into Azure AD, as you know. Think 500,000 objects for free, right? Now with AD Premium 1, it's unlimited. Okay? So the big question here is, do I need on-prem AD? Right? And I think throughout the day we'll be coming back and forth whether we need on-prem AD, but that is where we see it going. Okay? So we're going to jump into the demo. This is the last slide on this session. We're going to go straight in and have a look at this. But here's my AD, right? And one of the things that most of the organizations have been doing for about 10 years is do MFA, right? Or two-factor authentication, right? A lot of councils, a lot of NHS, etc. So I'd have to put a two-factor authentication server in there, right? What else will we put into our normal AD's environment for identity site protection, right? Has anyone putting PIN in there? Any sort of identity management tools in there, right? So things like conditional access, etc. So ADFS gives you some sort of PIN levels, right? What that is basically saying, I'll let you sign in using your Outlook client to get emails from Exchange server, right? ADFS will also let you federate, like I said, with non-Microsoft environments. So if I work with other companies or organizations, I can federate with them.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Come on in. I came from PowerON.
Okay.
Right. But the way Azure AD is set up is it's the core to all the Microsoft services, right? So, it's going to be short. Carry on. So, once we sync our users, and now we've got the ability to write back, okay? We now have that ability to write back with the new feature, the new AD Connect. We can start offering identity services like self-service password resets. Okay? So end users can reset their own passwords. Okay? If you take this component away, which is now being fed into there, we can get that true single sign-on thing. So we can extend our identity to the cloud. And a lot of features in here, right, that you probably have bought, paid for, or built and managed in this environment, you now need to say, do I really need it now? Especially if you have some form of EMS 0365 licensing, okay? So let's have a look at that, yeah?
Before you go on, you mentioned around that whole future stages where we need AD on-premise, etc. Are you going to cover much of that, or can I do some scribbling?
Go for some scribbling, and I'll set up.
This is only because I want to mess with the surface, but I did want that slide in.
Okay.
Take it through so it doesn't have the ADFS piece.
Let's see if you don't want the ADFS piece.
No.
Right, there you go.
So if this will let me squiggle on it.
Yeah, it's squiggled over there.
Okay, this might make it. Okay, I'll see how this goes then. So Ken was mentioning around this is where we are at the minute. We usually have that ADFS link. So hands up to those who've got ADFS at the minute. Basically everyone. Because that was the easiest way to start getting the identities to work, so that when you're in your local on-premise, you obviously want them just to sign on automatically. So ADFS would want to. There was also originally a concern of whether we put passwords up there. So we don't want Microsoft to know about passwords, so we'll get them forced back in, do all our authentication back on premise again. Now, then passwords being stored up in Azure AD, they are not the passwords. They are salted hash of the passwords, so like encrypted up there. So there should never be any concern about putting it up there. Now, like I say, that main reason was for ADFS was so that people could single sign on out to the cloud services. But we're getting more and more this scenario, and this is what we're going to try and talk about today around, well, actually, the more that I branch away from having stuff on-premise, from having applications up in the cloud, doing domain controllers up there, doing them down here, how do people log on? So two things have started to happen. Number one, as Ken has mentioned, where do I guess that this is going to ride? SS. This is probably not going to go well. When you've got Surface with a pen and...
You got a pen? I think I've got my pen.
Anyway, we'll see how it goes. I'll get you to squiggle on it. So we've now got SSO that's gone live, which means that we don't have to have ADFS moving back in and out, which means those that are on-premise will automatically single sign on up to the cloud resources. It also means that when you're accessing cloud resources, as we'll go through in a minute, and showing you how to take on-premise applications and make them externally accessible, but still provide single sign-on back into them on-premise applications. So this goes both ways. The other flip side is Windows 10 has this lovely thing called Azure AD join. Now, when a device is Azure AD joined, it will automatically sign in to any cloud-based application. The trouble is, most organizations where they have full-fat desktops or laptops don't only Azure AD join them, because it was a choice of either Azure AD join or domain join. So most organizations went, well, I need them to be able to access this HR system. It's a full-fat client, they need to be domain joined. Or more commonly, we have file shares on premise, all your home drives or your shared drives, they need to be able to access that. Microsoft have done another couple of things. I'm going to give you a pen.
No, I haven't got the pen.
You haven't got a pen. So down on the Azure, across the Azure AD and the AD side, in Windows 10 1709, is it going to be 1709? Might let the cat out back there. The next release of Windows 10, so the Fall Creators Edition, will have the ability to join both a domain and Azure Active Directory at the same time. This immediately starts to bridge that gap across doing both on-premise access and Azure access applications as well. So without even needing to enable that SSO layer, it will still do single sign-up to cloud apps because it's Azure AD joined. This is slightly different to what you do with ADFS in place, where it's Azure AD registered. So in the minute you can register it with Azure Active Directory, so you'll still see a domain join, but you have to set up loads of permissions on internally within your OU structures, new container names, some C names in there, and some group policy scripts for Windows 7 devices. This is just native Windows 10. The other flip side is, honestly, I didn't know this until I was testing the other day. If you have a pure Azure AD joined device, if it's sat on your local IP ranges and it is Azure AD joined so it can go out and get a token, it will use that token against your domain controllers and authenticate to your file shares. So that there is becoming less and less of a gap between on-premise domain joined and Azure AD domain joined in terms of what the limitations are in terms of accessing resources. That's kind of a little bit of a garbage one because I was on the fly, but I can think about it. Does that start to make sense a bit more? What I'm trying to get to the end degree of is this bit and the way that it's currently configured. Domain controllers, ADFS is becoming smaller and smaller in terms of need requirements. It's now becoming much more of an optional extra in terms of how we start to do stuff on the cloud side.
Yeah, so from your business perspective, you've really got to understand what is your AD, your on-prem AD, really what purpose is it serving in the future, all right? Now we're going to start looking at the Azure AD features, and you're going to see why we think it's the way to go forward, right? A lot of this stuff is being built in natively into it, but you will still have on-prem business needs, okay? So one of the most common things, and I guess I can't draw on there as well, but one of the most common things here, with nothing to do with this side of it, is to extend this AD as cheap DR into Azure IaaS. All right? Cheap DR means that a site-to-site VPN into an Azure network, all right, is very straightforward to do. It's site-to-site VPN takes us, if you've got the settings right, about 10 minutes. Okay, a day or two to go through your firewall change, etc. Right? But once you've got that and got your IP address ranges sorted out, it's another branch office. It's another site. Okay, you've now connected up. You can stick a DC straight in there. He just wants to draw.
Got to draw. Two things on that one. I don't know that. So apologies for those online because you won't be able to see the drawing on the board at this point because I know this works. If you are thinking about putting AD in Azure under the IaaS model, anyone running domain controllers already up in Azure? Is that not? No? So there is one major, or two major things to be aware of, and that is on the disks that you deploy, is set it to no caching.
Yeah.
Make sure you have an additional data disk. Additional and watch your AV extensions, exclusions.
Keep going then, I'll give you a few more. If you're going to stick it in there, make sure your AD sites is set up.
If you start to deploy Windows Server 2016, which if you deploy new servers, especially if it's in Azure, why not? Because in Azure, the license thing goes away. That has Windows Defender AV built into it. So if you then start to go, think, well, fine, I need to go and deploy Sophos or something on top of it, just be aware that it doesn't always disable Defender. So either cope with putting exclusions in for Defender or get it completely disabled and make sure that you ignore antivirus with exclusion. Yeah. Now, the domain services that was coming on to, so as Kaban was saying, if you build it in traditional IaaS, fine, you do it as if you're doing any sort of data center extension, multiple geographies, multiple regions, services. Now, IaaS is was a stopgap. It was that traditional mentality of this is how we do it at the minute, we'll just do it over here in somebody else's data center. You then have to pay for multiple VMs, you have to manage them domain controllers, you have to patch them, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. So from a business perspective, this is what you know, what your techie guys are comfortable with, this is what makes sense, this is the old world. Remember I said earlier that you're going to shift from IaaS to PaaS to SaaS. That's where it's going, right? These days, even AD is going in that sense. So that's the future. Yeah.
So domain services basically is a service from Microsoft. They have a multi-tenanted domain services. You enable that at the VNet layer, so your networking, you choose, right, this is where my core services are going to live. You enable it as a service, so then it will hook into your Azure AD and then basically stand up in its backend some domain controllers. It still gives you access to group policy management console, still gives you access to users and abusers, I mean AD computers and objects, whatever it's called. You can still create OUs, you can still structure them, but you do not have full administrative access. You are basically delegated access to an AD file. So you don't get enterprise admins, you don't get schema admins. So So it's not full featured. So some applications, especially things like Exchange that want to go in and modify it, say you must be the scheme admins group, are not going to be able to utilize that. Just be aware. But it doesn't.
You can't create a domain trust sign.
Can't connect to one.
Yeah. So that's today, right? Everything we're saying is today. So
Well,
6 months ago, that wasn't even there. You know, so we know where it's going.
I don't think Microsoft will do things like that in the future because they would rather get you on to kill that, kill off the IaaS. This is there to purely support where you say, well, I do need to lift and shift a print server into Azure. If I'm hosting that one print server that has to be domain joined, why do I then want to go and stand up 2 domain controllers to support that one print server?
So exactly that.
Kerberos and LDAP authentication.
Exactly that scenario happened with a customer of ours. They're 24 sites, 18 forests. So basically mergers and acquisitions, right? And they are literally spinning up domain controllers in sites with 5 people because of a print server or because of a file server, right? So that would be, look, get me an internet connection out. That's the most important thing for your sites now. So like I said, the 2 key things with Azure IaaS is your identity and your networks. And that's what we're all going to end up becoming, identity consultants and networking guys, right? And everything else is basically all done in this type of environment. And let's have a look at, so we keep harping on about the Azure AD, right? Let's have a look a bit more in detail why we think everything's going there and why we think that's where the eggs need to be. Discard the ink, who's been scribbling on my screen. I have got a little demo environment spun up, so thank you. So you guys all familiar with the Azure Portal? Yeah? And you've played around with it, built some stuff, mucked around, broken a few things. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, there it is. Okay, on the left-hand side, you've got basically a whole bunch of services that Microsoft provide, etc. We're just going to focus on the Azure Active Directory. So I've just literally clicked on that, and that's what we're seeing. Steve's dashboard will be. This is a demo environment, so we can break this up. If you haven't, or if you want to get familiar with it, just grab me during the session break, and I can spin you up a trial 90-day tenant, and you can test out a lot of these things, right? So anything like these, this is the real advantages that you try before you build kind of concepts. Okay, get familiar with it. Here we've got.
Oh, just on that one.
Yeah.
Actually, no, I'll come back to it. I just need to make sure it's not NDA anymore.
Okay. The look and feel. So this is AD in Azure. The look and feel, this is quite different, as you can tell, right? There's our typical users, right? You can see this test environment, so we're not syncing any users there with an on-prem environment. But first thing I'd recommend you do is go and register a domain, a test domain for yourselves, and have that DNS thing. And you can spin up a lab and have this there for testing most of your stuff. So you've always had, IT's always had dev and test environments, business always had dev and test environments. There's no difference reason why you should not have an IaaS dev and test environment as well, right? And Azure subscription for that. One of the things, if I said to you guys for your on-prem AD, right? Can you tell me the last time, Peter logged in, right? Yeah, you can tell me that. It's going to take a little bit of time, right? With Azure AD, all of that is built into it, right? It's all built in as reports, etc.
I was just literally going to mention this, even though I don't know why yours is rendering in dollars. So Microsoft literally have just announced that while yes, you could go and sign up for an Azure account, and they used to give you like 30 days worth of credit and stuff. So they still give you, in English, it's 150 quid's worth of credit, but the account from then onwards is still going to retain any of the free services for 12 months. So it makes it even more beneficial to sign up, because not only do you get the 150 quid's worth of credit to go mess around with across any service, but things like app services and stuff for websites on the free tiers will remain free, and you can literally spin up and run websites for the next 12 months for completely free, zero gratis.
Come back here 12 months later and sign up again. It is quite powerful in that sense that you get that 12-month trial, and those subscriptions, if you want to go into live, it's fairly easy to move it to your environments. Okay, so that's the beauty of all these subscriptions with Azure, that you can actually lift and shift into an EA into your existing live environments. So you can see we've got sign-ins. I can come through all that. One thing I do want to talk about though is this. The way groups are done in Azure is slightly different to on-prem AD groups. Okay, a lot of the features that you want to use in Azure AD will require an AD group. So you know your AD Connect syncs your groups, right? So your security groups. A lot of the rules that you're putting in for things like document protection, all that, will require an AD group in Azure, an Azure AD group. What that means for you is this. Are you guys familiar with local groups, global groups, right? You're going to have to think of another level now, because you're going to have an Azure group, right? What that means is that now you're going to have a cloud group, an on-prem group. On-prem group is a member of a cloud group kind of structure, right? So some of those automation features, a lot of the AIP protection features require an Azure group. The great thing about it is, though, the security groups in here are mail enabled. Okay?
Do you want to know another great benefit of getting rid of ADFS? Now that we've got the single sign-on, when you're in ADFS, then it comes up as federated mode. So you try going and clicking in here and creating a new user, it just tells you to go do one because your accounts are created on-premise. Remove the ADFS layer, so it becomes a managed Microsoft account with synced bits. You can create them up in the cloud. There's a tick box option within AD Connect to allow write back of users and groups, and then you can start to do your account creations directly from the portal or from any sort of PowerShell scripting and have them replicate back to on-premise use.
The main reason I like it is the audit logs, right? The sign-ins and all. Now, hold this thought, because when we get to the application session, next session, right, this is going to be very important for you. Okay? This is why. As an IT manager, I always struggle to know who logged onto the firewall. One of my IT guys went and changed the firewall logs, right? That's really pain in the backside, because I've got to hop on to the firewall app and get its and pull it all out, right? With this type of auditing, any sign into any Azure application, Azure hosted application, right, is logged. So not just when you sign into Azure, but I'm accessing SharePoint, I'm accessing Office 365, I'm accessing Outlook, I'm accessing Salesforce, right? Anything that I've hosted through Azure AD, through the MyApps portal, is going to be logged. When I logged on, what time, how long for, right? So forget the business for a moment. Forgetting the business for a moment, think of your IT admin tasks, right? A lot of the new admin portals are web-based, right? And we'll come back to that, but this will basically capture, right? Look, I logged on as administrator, Azure Portal, then I went into Intune, right? I got into the classic portal, I was playing around there. Look, that was me mucking around on Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is a completely different website, right? So all my sign-ins, look, I was in office.com. All my sign-ins to different environments are being tracked, and I can pull that out. That's very powerful from a compliance, security, blah, 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 right? But one of the great features that I do like about it is that. Now, let's just use the groups, right? That was just having a look at the user groups. You can see that we've got a lot of the stuff. I'm going to leave application proxy out. I'm going to leave AD Connect we've talked about, right? Syncing, etc. We'll leave them a built-in MDM, okay? What I will come up to is basically the security components, like conditional access, right? I'm beginning to like this thing. So, this for me is one of the main reasons why you'd want to move to Azure AD or use Azure AD as your future AD, right? Extending your AD, syncing it in here to the user's AD Connect, and then start building out your business model out of this. New policy, let's go. Name. Right. So I mentioned the users and groups, right? You can see there's a negative, so there's an exclude as well, right? Well, let's do the include. Let's say it's all users or selected users, right? I can't bother to touch screens. Let's set all users. This is, right, this is the next session, but these would be all your cloud apps, okay? So now we're starting to apply policies. We've got SaaS apps, applications that we're hosting out of Azure AD, right? And actually, let's go selected apps. We're going to apply a condition to a selected app. So this is a trial environment, so we mainly do Microsoft stuff, but you can see that, look, right? If we host all of our applications out through Azure AD, I now have the ability to control them. That's not a Microsoft app, right? That's not.
Wow, LinkedIn
right?
is.
It is now, isn't it? Yeah, right? But I can actually set up conditions, right, to box. Now, one of the key things that your identity or Azure identity gives you is something called credential stuffing, right? Or identity stuffing. What I mean by that is this. Let's go to LinkedIn, right? Let's assume LinkedIn is a corporate app and you have a marketing department and it's marketing at PowerON.com, right? So the classic way how we do this is our marketing team over there would have the username and password, right? But if either one of our marketing department left, etc., we'd have to rechange the password, right? Or if they want to, if their family or kids or whatever, we lost that password, someone got access to it, they'd have access to our LinkedIn department. With Azure AD, with identity stuffing, Azure AD manages the credentials for LinkedIn. Every 90 days it updates, etc. You sign in with your AD credentials. You sign in with your username and password. So many-to-one relationship there. So 5, 10 of us, right, would sign in and we would go to the same LinkedIn admin page, right? So if you've got any social type of systems like Facebook, etc., Instagram, accounts and all that, you can manage those with an identity. But if you leave the organization, I simply untick you, right, disable your account. You've never known the username and password to LinkedIn. You're always using your corporate credentials. Does that make sense? So it's very powerful in that sense that you're managing all your applications, and the more you manage through here, the more controls you have, because I can see when you sign in, I can do all those audit logs, but I can actually just administer it very easily. Okay, so let's select our apps. So we've got a couple of apps, right? Let's set some conditions up. Right. So, okay, if all users sign into LinkedIn and Box, building out that workflow, what are we going to do, right? Assigning risk is an algorithm, right? It's like heuristic, basically. What's the risk of where they're coming from, their IP address, etc. Right? The device or platform, you already can figure out what that means if they're coming from. Let's go do that one actually. It'll be fun, right? So think about some of your internal apps. Do they render well on devices, certain devices, right? So, for example, would you push out the intranet to your mobile phone, right? And you've got to think about usability and all that. But I shall basically configure that and say on selected devices, Android, iOS, that's what it's do about it. Right?
Sounds surprised. Windows Phone's not gone anywhere yet.
it's in your pocket, that's about it. The only person I know still using Windows Phone. Right. So what are we going to do? We basically, you can see locations. So if you set up your trusted networks, your LAN, right, your internal network versus your external network, so you can see how easy it is to build out these things, right? Right? Basically, we can actually set some rules up. There's MFA. Make the device compliant, so it's not jailbroken. Right? Required domain join, hybrid Azure AD, stuff we're talking about. You can see where it's going. Right? Requires approved client app. So what does that mean? So you can't, for example, connect up to emails using third-party apps. The only email app you can use is Outlook. Right? So this is now getting really powerful. Can you imagine trying to do this on an on-prem AD? The amount of effort it would take to set that up. Right? And think of the third-party products you'd have to implement, etc. So this is Azure AD Premium 1. Right? It comes with EMS, straightforward. The hardest part for you is to understand the business processes. Because implementing it is with, you have to buy this screen as well, by the way. Right?
For us.
For Steve, basically. Right? So, set up.
Why not ticking that? That's good.
Just wants to touch it. Right? Now, I'll leave the policy off, but I'll create it. Okay? So you can create as many policies as you like. Okay? Think of the old school way of working and the challenges you had, right? And the type of IT complexity you had to build for some of these conditions, right? And I worked in those scenarios very much. We don't want users accessing this, or they need to have a VPN, etc. Well, hell, if you publish out all your corporate apps, right, through Azure AD, that doesn't mean that that people can access them from anywhere. You set up those conditions where they access it from.
I just wanted to build on what you were saying earlier. When Ken was going through building that policy and it had the sign-in risks, so this is internally within our AD. So it's monitoring all our logons. You can see that it's flagging up some with risk events. If I dive into one of these, click on me, how risky am I? So at the minute, it's basically detected that I'm impossible, I travel impossibly. So hang on a second, I was logging in 1 minute at the Grimsby office address, next minute I'm logging in across in the United States. That's mainly because as IT, we tend to use VPNs and all the rest of it, remote desktops. That's just the way that is. But thinking about for normal users who don't, and are lucky if they manage to get out of bed into the office, if all of a sudden they're logging in across China, etc., this is where it starts to flag that up. That's when conditional access kicks in. They'll say, hang on a second, your threat profile for that user has just increased. Deny, you are not getting into the finance system without having to do anything. That make sense?
So let's extend that, because I want to go on to that a little bit more. You can see there's a few things over here, and the one I want to draw your attention to is VPN connectivity, which is improved. Okay? So now let's bring this back to the IaaS model again. Okay? I told you that, or we told you that identity is quite important, and the next bit is your networking. All right? What we are starting to see on the Azure IaaS side now is a lot of VPN virtual devices. All right? So how many of you guys use direct access? All right? So for the others, and there are genuine business reasons why you may need a VPN. All right? But we are now able to start feeding in VPNs, right, straight into your Azure network. So instead of VPNing into the office, right, I'm using a Cisco ASA VPN concentrator as a virtual device into my Azure network, and I VPN into my Azure network, right, which is still part of my office because I've extended it out, right, using site-side VPNs or express route. So it's just another branch office, but instead of VPNing into this data center here, I'm VPNing into that data center. Why would I do that? Well, if I'm thinking of my long-term IT services, right, what does need to stay here versus what I don't need? So what we're trying to do, obviously, is challenge your thinking of, do I really need that on-prem, right? And does an extension into Azure IaaS provide me DR for it? Then if it provides me DR, and I can VPN into it, then I can also load it over there and let Microsoft worry about the network load into that network, right? But I can also control that conditional access to those type of environments. That anything that basically you want to get to this app, you have to come in through the VPN. Right? So we're now able to start getting into customizing even these conditions. So multi-factor, right, authentication, and simple multi-factor authentication or simple conditional access is this. Here are my apps, right? If you're in the corporate network, you don't need MFA. If you're outside the corporate network, you have to MFA in. That's the most simple, obviously, setup that you can do. For all IT admin apps, for anything that IT administrators do, everything is MFA'd, regardless of location. And for the really important ones, you can only access them through the corporate network, not from outside. Right? They're just three simple policies you can apply to enhance that security and control it and log it. Right? So IT guys working from home, another form of shadow IT, right? There are ways that they can come in, right, to the corporate network and then access it. Right? Everyone else doing IT work has to MFA, multi-factor, regardless of what they're getting into. So now I can skin multi-factor authentication to literally every corporate app once we go through that session. Right? So I think conditional access is definitely something to look at, right? We'll cover the MDM and MAM, but basically just to have a look at.
I'm going to cover that later anyway. Do you want to do the single sign-on MFA or privileged access?
Yeah, let's go to privilege. Now this is AD Premium 2. So one of the security features, I'm in my lab. Hang on, let me just jump to the PowerON environment. See how good the Wi-Fi is. I said yes, didn't I? So what do? You close the window and reopen it. Let me just pull that over here so I don't. Okay.
Go on, use Edge, you know you want to.
Yeah, I'm thinking whether I should or not. Done Oh, you can. So let me just pull that across here. Just for those that aren't familiar with ADFS, you can see that I've gone to portal.azure.com and it's redirected me, right? And it's redirected me to our ADFS environment.
That won't be there in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Everyone seen my password? It's just dots.
You're saying that because you're going to use AD Connect with all the password right bags, single sign-on and all that. Just check all the boxes.
Yeah.
That's it.
I literally just go through, I'll strip ADFS back out and just let AD Connect handle it all.
Yeah. So that should rid us of 4 servers. Right. So one of the other features of
Just 1 second. With this one, I want to implement that one as well. For the, I didn't set up the original ADFS, but at the moment you have to link the Azure environment back into ADFS, so you are as well. You come with ADFS proxy. I'll just say that it is no longer a managed.
Yeah, so there's some PowerShell commandlets that you run on the Azure AD tenant. So you basically tell it to go back from federated to managed, and then you can strip out the ADFS infrastructure.
Yeah. So the PowerShell command is just basically saying, oh, I'm federated, go over there. Go over to that one. You're just going to break that.
And but when you say it is managed, it will know itself that I'm using AD Connect, so I can either do what you call a pass-through
So
authentication.
I'm probably oversimplifying what it actually is. So there are some severe guidance. There's some strict guidance to follow, because if you don't do a couple of the correct PowerShell commands, you could wipe out your entire directory. So it needs to be followed carefully to the letter. You have to do a couple of bits that basically tells it not to delete the objects, in which case it leaves it up there, converts it back to managed, and AD Connect will continue to synchronize the objects. It's just when an authentication comes into the Azure side, it doesn't try to then reroute it back to on-premise and authenticate the cloud and carry on. Now, to get true single sign-on as well, there is also then an agent which needs to go onto your domain controllers, because that's how it basically does the. Rather than Azure AD reaching back into your environment, your domain controllers with the agent will occasionally just pull out to Azure AD, say, hey, do you need something from me? Do you need a token? And it will pass tokens back up to the Azure AD side, which then get passed to the clients, and then the clients can access your on-premise resources.
So for those that want to understand ADFS, it is token based. We can have a chat afterwards. But the other idea is if you want to test, if you want to implement or get rid of ADFS, if you want to do it yourself, just get a test lab set up. You'll need an SSL certificate, etc. But it shouldn't be too hard to set that up. An ADFS server these days is done through AD Connect. So when you're doing the installer for AD Connect, it says, do you have ADFS servers? Do you have WAP proxies? Can I see them? I remember when I first started in BPOS days, it was about 30 consultancy days. Now it's down to a day or 2. All right. So yeah, you can test that out in the lab before you do it, but get comfortable, right? One of the other things that a lot of the security vendors are saying, and one of the things that we're starting to see a lot more of is privileged identity, right? So this is basically getting rid of global admins, right? Or admin access to every environment, and giving it, we call it just-in-time administration, or when you need it. Right?
Hands up, who logs onto their laptop and accesses their email with domain admin privileges, or at least some level of enhanced admin access. There. Couple of nods over there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I put my hand up straight away.
Yeah. Oh no, you don't anymore, because I
It's my
implemented
personal
this.
laptop. I've got global admin
Yeah,
access.
personal one, but not to this bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is absolute. So the best practice has always been have a normal account for your normal email, your web browsing, your dodgy site browsing, and have a separate admin account that you use to elevate up to do run as and all the rest of it. Now, obviously, as it comes to the cloud-based resources, you're not going to sit there right-clicking and doing run as, and you don't really want to be sat there having to go, well, fine, I'm now going to log out, I'm going to log back in again, single sign-on's getting in the way. So
So this is where privileged identity management starts to kick in. There is a version of this for on-premise if you're running Server 2016 on your domain controllers, but this is just the quick and easy turn on for the cloud version.
So we've already set this up. You can see that I actually can have 4 different roles that I can request elevation. So we have a group of approvers. I'm one of the approvers, so I approve other people, etc. Right? So we're down to 1 global admin account, 1 full admin account, and then the rest of us can elevate. Right? So I want global admin rights. Click that.
So you click on the name, not the actual item.
I'm going to just tap it everywhere. I didn't just close it.
There you go, I'll click it for you.
Told you. Fridge. That's what I call it, not edge. I call it fridge. Right. Verify your identity before proceeding. Right. So I'll get a text message on my phone. Right. Yeah. So this is quite powerful if you've got a lot of admin access around the world, etc. Right? Again, everything that's been done here is being logged. Right? Is 353.794. Now, that form of admin, right, we haven't got time to cover all of it, but you can actually apply that self-service password reset for your end users. So Azure AD will allow your end users to reset their own AD passwords, right? And it'll be a very similar type of process. They'll have to verify who they are, get a text message, put it in, etc. If you set it up. You can also set up things like questions, like mother's maiden name, etc. There is a component feeding into AD, isn't there?
Sorry, I was busy asking you request authorization.
Right.
Sorry, what was the question?
Security questions.
Yeah, so on the self-service password reset, it follows the general principle of you have about 4 different mechanisms to say, who are you? That can be either multi-factor authentication in terms of phones or tokens. So phones can be voice calls or text codes. I'm moving away from the whole voice voice calling, because being in organisations where we've done some testing stuff, and the users will go, I'm just going to try to do this. The user just going, oh, it's your authentication, and just put the start. They're not even thinking about it. Slightly different when you've got code, you have to go type that in somewhere, but the user just go, yeah, authenticate. So phone, text, app on your phone, you've then got security questions. So, what was your first pet? What's your maiden names? I'm not a fan personally of them because people forget what the mother's maiden name is. And then there's another way that I forget.
Well, the point about those security questions, I think, with the phone app, you can also do the biometric. Right? I have known, I don't know if they've enabled it yet or not, but you are able to customize those in the future, so those questions are relevant to your AD, relevant to your business. Now, this draws an important thing about populating your AD correctly. All right? So a lot of customers we talk to have not updated their AD, and all of this identity piece, right, all of that intelligence that you build, dynamic groups, dynamic security groups, which doesn't exist on-prem, but exists in the cloud. So if you're a member of marketing, right, you can get into this app straight away. Right? That type of dynamic security groups, all that means that you need to populate your AD properly. Right? Now, it's not really hard to populate your AD, but start building that process in. Have I been approved yet?
No, I was just going through it. So I would have received an email that said, Ken's asking for access. We've got the green in it, we've got a pen go view it here. That gets distributed to everyone that's within the approvers group. They get driven to the portal with the link on the email, drop straight to here. then you basically just go, yeah, fine. Now, the rule behind this is time period based. So I said, right, fine, you can now be a mobile admin for the next 12 hours. What do you mean, 24 hours then?
So you can adjust that time period, by the way, right?
Yeah, but you can't say 24 hours.
Okay. An hour should be enough. Right?
Better work quick.
But you can see that privileged identity is part of AD Premium Plan 2, right? But for those environments that have got a lot of admin access, etc., it's and if you're looking at security is a big thing for your organization, like pass the hash over things, this is quite important because your elevated admin privileges expire very quickly, right? So in my case, if there's a hash of my login stored on my local machine, after 12 hours, that's going to be useless.